Everybody, this is E. Marcel Pertune. Welcome to another edition of Sports Inquirer Show. We're recording this on November. No, actually recording this on March 31st, 2020. Man, it just shows how things are crazy right now. Yeah, several changes to everything that's going on. First of all, thanks for listening or watching our show. First of all, I'm going to do some recording, so hi to all of you out there. This is a Sports Inquirer Show, premier podcast that we discuss all news and notes in the world of sports. A different structure than we normally do for several reasons, as we'll break down everything that's going on in the world of sports. But as always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, thesportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. You can also head to our social media platforms on Twitter and Instagram, The Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. Make sure you go there, subscribe to everything that we're doing. Anytime we do updates from podcasts to write-ups, to our interviews, to pressers, everything is listed on those platforms. So when you go on there, every time we do it, we put it out there for you to check out. Also on Facebook, we have two pages on there, The Sports Inquirer, those are separate words, and Sports Inquirer, that's one word. So make sure you go to either of those two pages, check everything out. And then finally, subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud under Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. Actually, The Sports Inquirer, those separate words. The great part about those is that if you're watching this on YouTube but listening to us on SoundCloud, you can subscribe to those platforms, and every update that we do, we send it straight to you. So that's a really good way to follow everything. I know personally when I follow my different either podcasts or shows, it's very tough when you go every single day to those sites or things like that, or to those pages, and people haven't updated. I'm guilty of that just as much as everyone else. As far as not updating things consistently on a daily basis, I find a good way to subscribe to them. And when you subscribe, you're able to check out everything that they do. So whenever we do something new, you get a direct link or an email or whatever form that you get updates. And that leads a way for you to see everything that we are doing. Yeah, typically on our show, we'll break down all the different news, notes, and sports from all the games going on and trades and transactions. And we'll touch on a little bit of that in the NFL. But outside of that, it is a quiet world out there as far as everything going on in sports. We're recording this from our room, literally, because we're respecting all of the rules and regulations of the stay-at-home initiative. We record this in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, technically Ackworth, Georgia, suburb of Atlanta. And we pretty much in Cobb County are, if you're not going to the supermarket or going to your doctor, you're pretty much stuck at home. But a lot of us are going through it. And as I've been saying to everyone, as far as talking to family and friends through text and emails and calls, we're all in this together. There's no exceptions as far as you can't say it's based it on a certain type of people or economics or things like that. We're all going through the same type of situation. So all you have to do is just look at the situation and deal with it and try to adjust. But one thing that did happen as far as major news since our last show was the Olympics, the Summer Olympics that are supposed to take place this summer in Tokyo, Japan, were postponed to July of 2021. Very smart move. I knew that the Olympics, when this started about a month ago, I thought the Olympics would be one of the first major events to be eliminated, or not eliminated, but postponed or altered for several reasons. One, if you follow the news, you know this, the virus, this issue really started in Asia from China and related to the Asian countries, and it's expanded out to the world. It's not an Asian disease or a Chinese disease like a certain leader of the country I reside in likes to put it in, but that's a factor. So when you look at any other Asian countries, you have to consider it. And also, the Asian countries, especially in Japan, I follow New Japan Wrestling, and we'll get to our wrestling podcast, the Verbal Submission. We're going to record that tomorrow. But I follow professional wrestling, and New Japan canceled all of their events really from, we're in March right now. Yeah, we're in March. I would say from early February to now. They were the first major organization before Formula One, really before soccer leagues in Europe. They were the first group to really postpone and cancel events because the impact that the coronavirus is having in Japan. So I knew that they were first and the impact would be strong, and it has been strong. that it would affect everything going on in Japan as far as sporting events, and that included they actually got the Rugby World Cup in, so that was good. But I knew that in the summertime, or coming into now, the events in New Japan were getting canceled. So I figured if it happens in March, April, May, now you're heading towards the Olympic time. And sure enough, it was postponed. Smart move, not only for the or the people in Japan that are dealing with the virus and the logistics of it. And that's an issue that this isn't sports related, but it ties a little bit to it. And I think you see the other leagues thinking about this as well. When you have these events take place, it's not only the athletes themselves, it's the supporters, the spectators. You have the workers, whether it's concessions or construction, all the people involved in it. We look at the athletes and obviously think about them, and I'll get to their side of things in a moment as far as the postponement of the Olympics. But it's really more the spectators. And furthermore, the Olympics is the most international event, literally, that we have in the world. You have representation from pretty much every, especially the Summer Olympics, almost every established country has an athletic endeavor involved in the sport, whether it's a track athlete, a swimmer, handball, tennis, you go down the line to all of the events, just representation from literally hundreds of countries. And when you have that happen, they're all coming into one place. If there's the issue that we're dealing with now, they go to one location and then spread it out to the rest of the world. So that's where you can't really have that much going on as far as getting people to gather in one location, unfortunately contract this virus and bring it on. And you could talk about the severity of the virus, whether it's overblown or pre-existing conditions, age. You know, we've heard it all as far as you're more likely or less likely to get it based on your makeup. You really can't play on that. You have to look at everyone can be a carrier, everyone can get sick. So that's why it was smart, the Olympics, in that regard. And for the athletes as well, we already saw with the NBA when two Utah Jazz players with Mitchell and with Rudy Gobert, they contracted the disease. And then you kind of saw the different players and athletes that crossed paths with them, and they contracted the virus and dealt with it. I think, fortunately, I haven't heard any fatalities in relation to the NBA, but we've seen different people in all walks of life. Maybe someone you know has dealt with it and had either unfortunately passed away or are really sick right now dealing with it. And it goes from elderly to older people, senior citizens, all the way down to children. I think a baby contracted it and either died or is really struggling right now. So you can't look at it from and no one can get this. I think everyone can get it in some form. So as far as the athletes go, you say, okay, if they're an Olympic athlete, they're in some strong condition as far as their physicality, but you never know with this. We've seen other athletes, from soccer players, NBA players, contracting it and dealing with it. I think as far as the athletes go, yeah, it's a year. They literally peaked for 4 years to prepare for this competition, especially in almost all the sports. Maybe outside of basketball, because there's a lot of professionals that play yearly. And I know there are world championships and different leagues in the sports. There's professional volleyball, there's professional handball. I love handball. I keep mentioning it a lot. And then you look at like wrestling and judo, and there are events that go on between the Olympics between that 4-year gap. But still, the Olympics is the peak of a lot of these athletes and the highest competition and the most, it's the best award that they're going to get or they want to get. And they peak for this, and they peaked for this specific time frame in the summer of 2020 to be ready for it. But now they can't do it. And yeah, it's tough and it's difficult for them. But I think that for the majority of the athletes, and pushing it back a year to 2021, I know for every one or two older athletes, or maybe ones that recover. And a year is a long time. They might peak right now, or they might feel good, but injuries happen. They might hurt themselves. They might not qualify. I'm interested to see what they do with that, especially in sports such as track and swimming. And some of them may have not even had their qualifiers, as far as usually it's the national championship of that individual country. You're placed in a certain spot, you reach a certain time. I know here in Atlanta, the marathoners for the United States were able to qualify for their competition because it was here in Atlanta. But I don't know if the swim team had their trials yet. Track and field, I believe, did not have their trials. They may have, at least I'm saying for the United States. But do they carry over into the next year? Are they going to do a new set of trials? Do they combine the times, maybe do an average? All those logistics, I think, will be figured out eventually by each individual country. But there are going to be some athletes that were at their best right now, and they're not going to be able to participate in 2021. That's unfortunate, but I think if you look at the greater good or for the betterment of this, it's okay. And I know if you're United States listening to this or watching this, you're figuring, okay, and actually United States we're really starting to see a spike in the issues. The European countries and Asian countries have and I would say earlier in the month and even into February were really hit by the virus, and they're dealing with it in various forms. The United States is starting to catch up, unfortunately, numbers wise. But we could say, but it's not affecting us as hard as some of these other countries. That's not the point. Every country is affected by this at this stage, and I've always said, I've been saying the entire time, if whatever number you see as far as the people infected, you may as well double it, because not everyone's getting tested for whatever reason. Don't want to get political, but for whatever reason, I think it's just the numbers and logistics factor as well, as far as getting a number of tests out there. And it takes time to figure out if you're positive, and you might be it's just a lot of factors in it as far as the numbers go. So whatever you see 1,000 people infected, that's just a small number, but they'll make it kind of like 1,000. It may as well be 2,000, maybe even 3,000. Because a lot of people may have it, but they haven't been tested. They're carriers, but they're not really feeling the effects of it. Fatalities, unfortunately, is a hard fact as far as if you die and if it's related to the virus. Yes, that's a solid number, but that number is going to go up because I think, unfortunately, things are going to develop in a bad way. So by the time if you said let's hold off let's not postpone it yet, let's wait till April or even May, the numbers may even be worse than they are now. And you got to give people fair time if they were traveling to the event, that they can maybe switch logistics of it. I know personally, I was going to try to make a trip to New York. I'm originally from New York City, for those of you first time kind of checking us out. Originally from New York City, I was going to go up in April for an event with my high school, which was canceled, and New York's really being hit hard with. But it also was a fact that it canceled my flight, and luckily I got full credit back for it, but you had to deal with the cancellation of things and logistics of it if I was going to stay with somebody and all that, things like that. So that's just for me going from Atlanta to New York. Imagine people traveling from United States all the way to Japan. You got to figure all that out. So I thought it was a smart move in regards to it. And they did have a date that they set for now, July 23rd, 2021. I think it'll be okay as far as you have the Olympics in 2021. You can bring them right back in 2024. I don't think there's an issue as far as that goes. But you also have different sports in the United States. We'll go back more domestically to the United States and how they're dealing with the situation. We'll go to Major League Baseball, which we should have been in the first week of Major League Baseball for the 2020 season, but obviously that's not taking place. Season has been postponed as far as the start of it. Baseball's in a tricky spot in comparison to some other sports like Major League Soccer, NBA, and NHL, which we cover. Those sports were already in season. I'd say the NBA and the NHL were about 75% done with their regular season. So their logistics are completely different. They're trying to figure out how to finish a regular season and possibly go into some form of the playoffs. I think with that, and we'll touch on those a little bit later, but those seasons started, and they're trying to finish it out. Baseball hasn't even started yet. And I think that helps them a little bit They keep postponing, keep pushing back. If they have to cancel the entire season, which I don't think will happen, let's hope not. I think it's a little bit better for them because it's like almost like a strike shortened year, a strike stricken year, or a postponement. They don't have it didn't start, so they didn't have to cut it off and finish it. So in a way, that kind of helps them. I think that they're in the middle of the summer, so I don't think there are any issues or conflicts with their stadiums and availability. I think the conflict can happen in the NHL and the NBA if they try to do postseasons at the same time, and they are sometimes once in a while, if let's say a Staples Center or Madison Square Garden, if the Los Angeles teams, hockey and basketball, are in the playoffs at the same time, NHL if the Knicks or the Rangers, the bad teams right now, but in the past they've had to share the arenas. And Chicago as well with the Bulls and the Blackhawks. There are about 5 or 6 of them. You go down the line. But I think those teams, you're going to see some logistical issues there. But the Major League Baseball does not have to deal with that factor. So that kind of helps. I've heard some of the alternatives people have suggested from doubleheaders, 7-inning doubleheaders, where each of the 2 games are 7 innings each. Elimination of the All-Star game, so you get some more regular season games in. I think it's all on the table. Maybe even having, if it goes extra innings, having a runner at second base to start the inning, similar to what softball does, at least collegiate level, international level as well, I believe. You add all of that up together, you have to make these alternatives. You got to think about those things. 162 games just isn't going to happen. You can't have guys playing every single day. One, because logistically that's very hard as far as flights. And 2, rain. It's raining right now here in Georgia. If there was a game scheduled for today and it was raining like it is right now, the Braves couldn't play right now. So that's a game etched out. And then if you're adding all these doubleheaders, how do you make up all of those games? Baseball's dealt with this before. They've had strike-shortened seasons. 1981 is a big example. I think they got 120 games in and split them into 2 halves. It was a little bit of a logistical mess, but they got it in and figured it out. But I think it's all on the table as far as that goes. And I think you're also going to have a different dynamic as far as the actual players on the field. We've seen the MLB and the Player Association made an agreement as far as the service time, and I think they're going to allow that service time to count for an entire year once they get started, and that's a major factor as far as guys' contracts and tenure, because it affects when they become free agents or what they can make in arbitration and tiers along those lines. You also have season injuries. We already saw Chris Sale from Boston and Noah Syndergaard from New York Mets, 2 pitchers, have season-ending Tommy John surgeries. Would they have gotten those surgeries at the specific time if there wasn't the postponement of start of the regular season? That's a factor. You look at the other end. We'll see with the Atlanta Braves, like Cole Hamels, who was the new pitcher for the Braves. He was going to start in the regular season. He's dealing with arm trouble. So I think he was going to miss the first month and a half. He was going to come back maybe in late May, early June. Maybe he comes back healthy completely, and that helps the Braves. So some guys who may be dealing with some injuries that they couldn't start the regular season, they can come back, and that's a factor as well. But I think, as I mentioned, with like the Olympics and other things, it's all an open table or open book as far as how things are going to be handled. And I did say I mentioned the NHL and the NBA. I think when you come to those sports, I think what they'll eventually do, and this can change. We're recording this, as I said, on March 31st. By our next show on early April, 1st or 2nd, whenever we do it, they may make an announcement, a blanket announcement about season being canceled or playoffs starting immediately. I think what they want to do is, if it all works out, and we might have games in empty arenas, maybe some neutral sites. A media member mentioned having games on cruise ships. I don't even want to acknowledge his name and give him the credit on my show, which is ludicrous. And I think he's trolling and trying to get hits and likes and get people talking about him. But I think what they want to do is maybe get 2 or 3 more regular season games, not only for just to conclude the regular season, but for the teams that are not in the playoffs. Everyone's talking about the playoff teams that are going to be in there, but we'll look here locally, the Atlanta Hawks, they're not going to be a playoff team, but I'm pretty sure they want to get at least 2 or 3 regular season games just for commerce. And I know they've been paying, or a lot of these teams are saying they're paying for the part-time workers that work at the stadium, but I'm sure they want to get salary employees. They want to work. They just want to get some income and revenue coming into the arena. So I think you'll see maybe 3 or 4 regular season games, 2 home, 2 away for each team, and then you'll see the playoffs start. I don't think we'll see best of 7s all throughout. You'll probably see some best of 5s. Best of 3 is a little rough. That's kind of because you lose one game, and you lose your first game, you only have one more game to lose before you get eliminated. That's a little rough. But as I said, we don't know what's going to happen. Same thing with the NHL, similar deal. When I say with the NBA, same deal with the NHL. So I think with those leagues, we're going to see some form of a regular season conclusion. As I said, it literally may be 3 or 4 games just to give each team a home game or 2 to just wrap up the regular season that aren't going to be in the playoffs, just for them. And then also for the teams that are going to be in the playoffs, they need to get their players in shape and in condition and ready to go. And that's where the leagues have to give the players probably, and even baseball, at least a few weeks of a training camp or some form of it so that they're able to get in shape and condition and be ready to compete at a high level. So I think that's what you're going to see happen there with those sports. And then as we transition over into, let's see, what are we talking about now? Yeah, we transition into baseball, or we did baseball. We transitioned into football in the NFL. I like that the draft is staying where it is. The draft is later on, as in late April. For all the people out there that are talking about this is bad to have free agency and bad to have NFL draft in the current state that we're in right now, I counter that with it's good that we have front office news and activities to talk about. For my show and for all the other sports media people, and I don't say feel sorry for certain groups of people, but sports media is struggling right now, especially on the local side of things. I know you're watching ESPN and you're seeing Fox Sports and NBC Sports and seeing those guys, and they're doing their talking head shows that go on during the day, and they're Skyping or Zooming or doing their shows from their homes and all that stuff, and that's fine and dandy. They're still working, still being compensated. Think about all of the other people out there, your local radio stations, your local TV shows or TV stations, your local reporters. Those guys, myself included, are really struggling right now, from layoffs to furloughs, to all terms. It's all the same thing. You're not being compensated right now because there's nothing much to report as far as in-game activities. So having the NFL draft, having the free agency, and with Tom Brady and where's Cam Newton going to sign and Jameis Winston, that's a good thing that can still go on. And plus, the scouts and general managers, they have enough information as far as to drafting players. It breaks down like this. They've been evaluating the same players really since the fall. They've been attending games, and some of them up to 2 years. They've been looking at juniors and seniors. I know how it works because I've worked in college athletics and I see how it operates. I'm not like an expert, but you put 2 and 2 together, you figure some things out. Scouts look at juniors and seniors, at least in the NFL. And then you look at other sports like college basketball, you're literally looking at them at the high school level because that's how it works. So you're looking at these guys from their past 2 years playing on the field. You see their pros and cons. You've scouted them out. You've done all that. You've talked to the head coaches and assistant coaches at these colleges, the trainers. You've done your due diligence in that regard. You had the combine where all those players were at in Indianapolis. They got their physicals. You're able to do interviews, so you got to see them participate in drills and all of that stuff. Even some teams that had pro days. I know here in the state of Georgia, Georgia Tech and Georgia State had their pro days. So at least you had that to those teams. I know Alabama didn't have theirs and some other teams, but you've done all of that stuff. So you know the players that you're going to draft. You can call them, you can Skype them, you can have a conversation with them. I know you want to have a traditional view of, and you want to I know you want to bring them to your facility and that type of deal, but we have modern technology. You can work that out. The only thing that can kind of hurt you in the evaluation is the health side of things. We'll talk about Tua from Alabama, the quarterback. You saw him at the combine. I know he did his own physical with his doctors, but it would be nice for you to go have him come to your facility. Say you're the Bengals, Dolphins, Chargers, teams looking for a quarterback. So you would be nice to have him to come to your facility. You get a physical evaluation from your doctors. You check out the MRIs and scans and blood work, all that stuff. So you would like to have that. But he was at the combine. I'm sure if you need that information, you can get it from him and his agent and things along those lines. As far as evaluating the scans, the x-rays, MRIs, all that good stuff. So you can find a way to see all of that stuff if you want to, as far as digitally. But it still would be nice to have him come to your facility and have your own doctors look at him and physically do a physical on him. But outside of that, NFL draft is fine. It can still go on. I think a lot of people, and we're all guilty of this, we try to make our jobs sound a lot harder than it is because either we want sympathy or we want to be appreciated and valued. So I hear all of these GMs and even head and coaches and scouts, man, this is so hard. We need this, we need that. Yes, I mean, you need, and it is tougher because this is different. And we're all dealing with it. But they can still do their jobs and evaluations. And I don't want to hear also, we drafted a guy and he played bad. Oh, it's because we couldn't evaluate him completely. That's BS. You can do a full evaluation in 2020 because as I said, they've been following these guys for 2 years. You have everything on them. You've talked to the family. You've talked to the trainer or the sports information director. You've done all that stuff to get an evaluation, kind of what the guy's mindset is. You're good. They're straight. They'll be all right. As far as NFL and just touching on some of the major news, because I said we're trying a different format. This is on video. So since I did my last video or video of this type of format, there were some NFL moves that took place. I mean, Tom Brady going to the Tampa Bay Bucks, that's been evaluated over and over again. I think it was just a separation that was needed for both sides with New England and with Tom Brady. They got 19 years of starting and 20 years of time on the roster. I see some of these fans, supporters, and even some in the media that are mad at Tom Brady, these Patriot fans or supporters. How can you be mad at that guy for anything? He gave his entire athletic professional career to the team, won 6 championships, went to 9 Super Bowls, maybe the best player of all time, at least the best quarterback, wherever evaluation is, but he's on a short list. And you're mad at him for moving on to another organization. New England fans and the Boston fans are very interesting in that regard. They're very quick they like to love you, but they love to hate you even more. I'll just put it that way. So fans that are mad at him, that's ridiculous. How he does in Tampa, no one knows. I think the deal, 2 years, $50 million of guaranteed money, $8 million in incentives. I think that says a lot about, if he was offered that in New England, he probably would have stayed. I think he would have rode out the last 2 years of his career in New England. But the fact that he took that off from Tampa, which, a good organization, it's not the best. They won a Super Bowl championship, I'll give you that. But a team that finished below 500 last year, really not I wouldn't put him in the top 10 talent-wise in the league. So for him to go to Tampa shows you New England really did not want him. And Robert Kraft he's smart in this regard. He's talking about he's done the full-page ad in the Boston newspapers. Said Tom's great. He's like a son to me, all this other stuff. He could have brought him back. He could have overridden Bill Belichick. And Belichick wanted to move on from Brady. And I can understand that. Brady has regressed in the past 2 years, especially this last year. You see that he's not the quarterback that he used to be, which is understandable. The man is 43 years old. Understandable. So Belichick wanted to move on to a quarterback, and we'll talk about some of his options as far as replacing Brady. But Kraft could have brought back Brady, overridden Belichick, and they could have worked it out and figured it out. But he didn't. So now he's trying to I'll say cop a plea, as we say in the streets, but he's trying to look at it, the fact that, okay, we gave Brady a chance to come back. He made a move. We're moved on. No, you made an offer. Say you made an offer, but it was a lowball offer. We all know this. So he's moved on to another organization, which is understandable. As far as I said, him in Tampa, he's got Goodwin and he's got Evans at wide receiver, O.J. Howard at tight end. So he's got targets to throw to. Got to figure out the offensive line, which I think they will, because you're not going to bring in Tom Brady and not address the offensive line. Bruce Arians has coached a lot of quarterbacks of different skill levels and types, from Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, Carson Palmer. You know, you go down the line. So he likes quarterbacks, and he knows how to work with them. So I think Brady will appreciate that in comparison to the gruff nature of Bill Belichick, which we all know. So I think that's good. He's going to be in a warm weather. I think that's a factor. He's going to play 10 games in pretty good conditions. Guy figures 8 home games in Tampa will be solid. Plus he gets to play in domes on the road with Atlanta and New Orleans. So those are 10 games that can be in pretty peak conditions for him in comparison to playing in New England, where it's cold, rainy, windy. Then you got to go to Buffalo and New York as well. So a lot going on there. So I think you look at that type of situation, it's a good move. Quick flight to New York. I know his family resides in the Northeast in New York. Or they can go to Miami. They want to go that way with with Giselle and her business obligations. So either way, New York flights are pretty quick and efficient. He's flying private. He's not going to be standing at the local airport trying to get a flight on Southwest, which we all do, including myself. He'll be all right. So I think as far as you look at all those options, that's pretty good. It's still got a draft. It's still more in the offseason, so I'm not going to say they're going to be a playoff team or be in a Super Bowl. But as far as his options, I thought that it was a pretty solid one. Tennessee, I believe, did not want him. They signed up Ryan Tannehill to an extension pretty quickly. I think the Chargers are going to go with the younger quarterback and their move to the new stadium. What were some of the other options people were saying? Yeah, where else? Miami. I think they're going to draft a quarterback pretty early, so they're going to want to go in that direction. So you look at all those things. It was smart for Brady to go to Tampa as far as his choices go. Now, where does New England go? I think they have some good choices to work it out. I think Jarrett Stidham's going to get a solid shot to be the starter. He's going to be entering his second year in the NFL, second year with the team. You saw him play quite a bit in the previous preseason and do well and do all right. So I think Belichick's going to like that he's in the system. He's already been coached up by Josh McDaniels, so he knows the system. But they brought in Brian Hoyer as a backup. I think that's so that's going to be a backup for him, maybe a third quarterback just to evaluate some things and help get Stidham through the season. I don't know if Cam Newton or Jameis Winston are going to be good choices, just their style of play. With Winston, he turns the ball over too much. We already know that. 30 interceptions last year. Belichick's not going to work with that, not going to like that at all. I think Cam Newton, health concerns with him, and I think Winston and Newton could still be starters in the NFL, but you have to look at it with an objective eye. With Winston, can he play an entire season without being turnover prone? And he hasn't proven that. The crazy part about him and with Marcus Mariota, who I thought would have been an interesting option for the Patriots, he ended up signing with the Raiders. Both those guys are not even in their second contracts. They're, I think, 25 and 26 years old, and yet those guys were drafted top 2 in their draft, 1 and 2, and they're both now with their original teams, which is crazy, which rarely happens in that extreme. But Mariota's dealt with injury issues as well and inconsistent play. So you have Newton and Mariota with injuries, and you have Winston just turning the ball over. None of those guys are viable options for New England. I think the Andy Dalton deal is a serious consideration because the Bengals, whether they stay in number 1 or trade down, are taking a quarterback with their pick. Whether it's, I think it's going to be Joe Burrow, that's going to take him number 1 overall. But you also have Tua as an option. If you like Justin Herbert or Love out of Utah State, I think all of those are viable potential options for them to do. So I think Andy Dalton is definitely on the table for the Patriots. Plus, he's a good stopgap guy. Maybe a year of him or two, maybe to get Stenham even more ready to play. Because you have Stenham on a pretty respectable, it's a rookie contract. He was a low round draft pick. You can keep him on the roster for another year or two as a backup. That's not the worst thing in the world. So New England, I think, has choices with what they can do. So that's the NFL, and I'm surprised that you have other guys available. We mentioned the quarterbacks. Jadeveon Clowney being available is a surprise to me. I think his asking price may be a little too strong. I think that's what he's running into. He's physically maybe the most talented defensive lineman in the NFL. You look at his size, his speed. You look at that and you figure he should be a dominant player. He should be in that J.J. Watt when he's healthy, Aaron Donald. We're talking about those guys as defensive players of the year, potential Hall of Famers in that regard. With Clown, he's really only put together maybe one solid year, beginning to end in his career. And you look at injuries, that's really hurt him ever since he got into the league. And whether it's been the legs, dealt with a core injury, even when he was in Seattle this past year, dealing with all of that stuff. So can he stay put together for an entire 16-year season? And you're asking for $20 million a year. So being that Watt and that Aaron Donald type of money, he's not going to get that. I'm just surprised that at this stage that price hasn't lowered, and he maybe took a 1-year, $15 million deal with somebody, maybe a prove-it year. Or maybe, and he may have been offered that by some teams. Maybe like how Atlanta offered, if Dante Fowler can get 3 years and $48 million, and probably you look at the structure of it, it's probably the first 2 years are the years you really want to look at as far as guarantees and what the per year market is for that contract. I'm surprised Clowney has been able to get a deal similar to that, 3 years, maybe $80 million, $40 million guaranteed, something along those lines. He's not even close to that. I don't know. I'm just surprised that a guy who has that talent is still on the open market as we record this show. Things may change by the time we do another one, but with those guys, you tend to have that free agency. That first week is the active, busy week. And then after that, you get some, I won't call them bargain bin players, but you see a lot of the second tier of players. A lot of 1-year deals, things along those lines. Quarterbacks tend to last a little bit longer because they may get cut a little bit later just to break down the calendar with Newton and Winston. I think right now you're at the point where it is kind of similar to the draft, as I was talking about, especially with Newton and with Clowney. You want to have them in your facility. And we can't do that right now because of the coronavirus. There's no traveling. Facilities are all closed around the country and all the NFL teams. And once I mentioned with Tua and getting a physical on him, you really got to do that with Newton as well as Clowney because those guys have dealt with injuries over the past few years. Some really, I say Clowney through his entire career, and then Newton the past 2 years, from the shoulder to a back, and now dealing with the foot that he had some work done on, and that cost him the end of last season. You put all that together, and he's in his 30s, at least Cam Newton is, he's 31, I believe. You put all that together, major issues there as far as health. So I can see why those guys, and maybe that's why Clowney hasn't been signed yet when I'm talking about it now. You want to get him in your facility and get a look at him and go beyond the scans and the MRIs or whatever that his agent's going to give you. You want to do a little bit more than that. So I kind of understand in that regard why things may be a little bit different for them. And then finally, we'll conclude the show on this. And as I said, we do our show called Verbal Submission. Check the site out or check that show out. We go deeper into mixed martial arts, professional wrestling, and those sports have been hit as well in a major way by the virus. But we'll have a touch on this because it is kind of overarching into the overall theme of how things are being changed and affected. Affected, not infected, affected. The UFC just canceled UFC 249, which was originally scheduled for April 18th in Brooklyn, New York. I want to see Khabib and Tony Ferguson fight for the lightweight title just as much as anybody. This fight, for those of you not in the mixed martial arts world, has been scheduled to be fought literally 4 times prior to this one in UFC 249. Khabib is the champion. He beat Conor McGregor. You know who Conor is, at least, probably. He beat him last year, and he's the undisputed lightweight champion. Tony Ferguson, he's held the belt too because of there have been issues as far as injuries and interim titles and all this other stuff. So those guys have legitimate claims to the championship. I'm really giving a overarching form of this. It goes deeper, but that's really what the Cliff Notes version of it. So there are two best fighters in the lightweight division. Some would say the best fighters in the world, and you can make that argument in a major way. It's in New York. It was an awesome atmosphere, but it just cannot happen. And now Khabib is literally stuck in Russia. That's where he's from, where he lives, he trains. He cannot fly into the United States. And now we're trying to get alternatives of maybe they'd have it at the United Arab Emirates, Dubai. Maybe have the fight in Russia. But Russia's dealing with everyone's dealing with this virus. It's not going to happen. Similar to WrestleMania, which, if you know what WrestleMania is, and as far as professional wrestling, it's usually filled in a football stadium, 85, 90,000 fans cheering, and it's a big spectacle. It was held in an empty gym in Tampa, Florida, a week ago, and they're going to air it later on this weekend. You got to make changes. You got to adjust. And look, as I said, I want to see this fight just as much as anybody. I've been following these guys for years, and as I said, this is the 5th time this fight has been scheduled. It hasn't been canceled yet. That's why I'm saying it's been canceled 4 times. We want this fight to happen, but you can't have a stadium full of people, especially in New York. And if you follow the news in New York, and it's a lot going on there beyond a fight card of mixed martial artists. So you can't have it there. Can't have it in Las Vegas. They're in the same deal in Nevada. Trying to do it just can't happen. Again, it can't happen. And as I said, we're recording this on the 31st. It may be canceled by the time we finish the show. I'm checking my sports outlets now because it might be, it's still going on as we're speaking right now. By the time you listen to this, it may be canceled or postponed. So this may all be a moot point of me saying to cancel the event. But still, you got to make adjustments, and the realities are just very different from what we can deal with. So in the end, I think that event should be postponed and should be canceled. And the problem is, they have fights literally every month. So you say, and that's where I think Dana White and the UFC, they're concerned about, because how do you fit that fight into future cards or the rest of the card? Do you add it to subsequent cards in the future? Do you say, like Rice says, scheduled for April 18th? You just say it's going to be in November or December, but that may conflict with another card you already have set up, and it's in Barclays Center. They have the Nets. They play there as far as Brooklyn Nets. The Long Island, the Islanders, the New York Islanders. The NHL team. Yes, they play at that arena too. So logistically, what do you do? How do you handle all of that stuff? I understand all of those things. But man, it's just a bad look right now that we are 2 weeks away or 3 weeks away from that event, and your main eventer is in Russia, cannot fly into the United States, and the fight is still scheduled. You got to move on. You got to figure it out. And I think the cooler heads will prevail, but it's the UFC. It's Dana White. They operate similar to WWE and Vince McMahon. They operate in their own bubbles, in their own worlds, and that's made them as successful as they are. And maybe in Vince's greatest promoter history of professional wrestling, and WWE is the standard bearer. UFC has reached an incredible level in mixed martial arts and around the world, and those guys are big parts of it. And part of that greatness to get it to where it is now is that stubbornness, that show must go on mentality. But it's not going to fly in this type of situation. So I would like to see it canceled sooner rather than later. Similar to all logistics I talked about with the Olympics, same deal with the martial artists and with the fans and supporters and everyone involved, especially in New York. And it'd be a bad look as well. Also, you're bringing all these people into LaGuardia or Kennedy or Newark with the airports pretty much shut down, and then you're driving around and seeing all the hospitals overworked and overwhelmed, and you go into an arena with workers that cannot go there, or if going extreme angle, maybe had a family member or pass, or dealing with, or sick themselves and dealing with all that, and then gonna have a fight in an empty arena. That's not gonna fly. That's not gonna work, I don't think. But we'll see what happens by the time we record the next show. They might still be all things go, but I think by the time we do another show, they may have to move on. And then I know Justin Gaethje has suggested that he wants to fight and replace Khabib. Who else? I think there are one or two others that say they want to, and quality guys who are right there, number 2, number 3 ranked fighters, probably in that division. But it's got to be Ferguson and Khabib to fight for that belt. So we'll see what happens with all that stuff. And that'll conclude today's show. Thanks for listening and following everything that we're doing and working with us as we adjust and figure things out, like all of you out there are. If you want to follow everything that we're doing, still head to thesportsinquirer.net for all of our premier news and notes in the world of sports. You go to Twitter and Instagram on the Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. You can go to Facebook and our 2 pages there, the Sports Inquirer and Sports Inquirer. And subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud so you can listen to this show and other Sports Inquirer shows, verbal submissions. We still have our interviews and pressers from Atlanta United, and I didn't touch on MLS. I should have touched them as well. They're dealing, whatever I said about all the other leagues, MLS, same deal. So, we're adjusting and trying to figure it out, but I still have some good content from there, from manager Frank DeBoer and Brad Guzan and all their players that have spoken over the past few months. You can go and do an archive, just do a back search and see all that going on there. Georgia State, Georgia Tech, things along those lines. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, good fight and good night.